So a long ass time ago, we sampled a game for the Sega Saturn called Mansion of Hidden Souls, which is one of those fancy schmancy full motion video games that were all the rage at the time because people were stupid back then. And that game was a sequel of sorts to another game of the same name that graced the good old Sega CD add-on a few years prior. And well, in case you didn't catch the title card or read the thing that told you what the thing you're watching is going to be, today's subject matter is Mansion of Hidden Souls, released in 1993-94 for the Sega CD, being played off the Sega Genesis Mini 2 plug-and-play device that was released a few years back, and only limited numbers were made of this thing. I was lucky enough to snag one of these. It sees regular play every now and then, and now it's providing review fodder for this piece of business that we're looking at for some reason or another. I don't know, I wasn't too enamored with the one on Saturn, so I wasn't chomping at the bit looking up its Sega CD predecessor, but since it's on this thing, curiosity got the better of me, and honestly, this turned out to be a bit of a surprise, but not that much of a surprise. Anyway, the story of Mansion of Hidden Souls is that you're a poor fellow whose sister has become lost in this mansion, and you have to save her before she turns into a butterfly or something. Spoiler, she eventually becomes a butterfly because that's all you're interacting with in this game. Butterflies. You don't even get the pleasure of meeting Zordon's extended family like in the Saturn version, but maybe seeing nothing but butterflies in this story adds to the tension of sorts. Everyone else is a butterfly, they want to turn the sister into a butterfly, well most of them anyway, and you're trying to escape the mansion with her in tow before the stroke of midnight if you ever have any hope of turning her back into her normal human self. But let's backtrack a bit here. Mansion of Hidden Souls is an interactive full-motion video point-and-click game where you navigate a mansion of hidden souls, butterflies, and other things. The entirety of the game is played through pre-rendered video sequences depicted from a first-person perspective as you're navigating this mansion and uncovering items to solve the mystery of your missing sister. You use the D-pad to move around, up moves forward while left and right turns, A button cycles through your inventory of items that you've amassed, C button uses selected item, and B button cancels. And that's the thick of it, really. You navigate the halls, you examine things, and you occasionally get taunted by butterflies.
What are you doing here? If you're here to become a butterfly, you must seek out the hunter.
Sometimes you'll be prompted to solve a puzzle, but these are few and far between. It's a very simplistic, very shallow experience that basically boils down to figuring out the correct sequence of actions to be played in a specific order, since this is a fairly linear game with little to no variation beyond the main path. You might get a bad ending for failing to escape the mansion in time towards the end, but that's about the extent of it. Once you figure out the correct sequence of events and actions, shouldn't take you more than 30 to 40 minutes tops to beat the whole thing. Even so, if you acquire the diary item, you can save up to 3 games which will pick up where you left off, which is a nice touch. When it comes to the overall presentation, well, Mansion of Hidden Souls is a full motion video experience through and through. Everything is in pre-rendered CG that is lacking in color and finer details due to the limited Mega Drive color palette, and the frame rate runs somewhere between 1 and 5 frames per second if I'm being generous there. There are some instances where the muddy visuals do add to the overall atmosphere of the game, mostly in some of the darker chambers, but when it comes to the more brightly lit rooms, it just looks grainy and drab and takes away from the pre-rendered visuals as a whole. Maybe it's a case where had this been on more capable hardware like a top-of-the-line PC CD-ROM with VGA graphics, this would have looked a little better, and some could argue that the muddier visuals add to the overall atmosphere of Mansion of Hidden Souls. Maybe there's a kernel of truth to that, but not when the animation is about as smooth as a PowerPoint presentation. The audio isn't too bad, for the most part at least. You have occasional jingles and pieces of background music that sound somewhat ominous and spooky, which does feel entirely appropriate for the type of game you're playing, but there's also your stock sounds of footsteps and other things that play out. There's a considerable amount of voice acting here, and all things considered, it's not great, but passable enough to move the flimsy story forward at least. Overall, Mansion of Hidden Souls on Sega CD, Well, it's an FMV game that plays like most FMV games of its day. Lots of fancy, cheaply made low-resolution video with limited interactivity and gameplay. Admittedly, this sort of thing does have its audience who find this stuff engaging, and for what it's worth, what little this game actually does, it does well enough. I think that's about the most positive thing I could say about Mansion of Hidden Souls, because otherwise, I didn't find this to be entirely compelling or engaging in either the point-and-click adventure sense or even the FMV game sense. Not exactly my cup of tea, but then again, it might be yours. Either way, this one's nothing special.